Today we're going to learn about line. Line is a vital component of creating any artwork. A line is a mark that spans a distance between 2 points or the path of a moving point. A common mistake that young artists make when first learning to draw is using the same type of line over and over again. They don't tend to use a lot of different variations of lines, so in this video we're going to go over all the different types of lines. First off, lines can be found everywhere. Lines can be used to represent objects, they can be used to represent people, they can be used to represent places, they can be used to represent ideas. When we say they can be used to represent ideas, we mean in a descriptive or kind of a symbolic way. So they're not necessarily kind of explaining the idea in full, you're not writing it out, like by handwriting, you're actually drawing out the idea. There are 5 basic types of line. The first one is vertical, the second one is horizontal, the third one is zigzag, the fourth one is diagonal, and the fifth one is curved. Each line is used to represent or create some sort of feel to the picture. For example, vertical lines are lines that move up and down and they don't have a slant, and they give the appearance of height because they're perpendicular to the earth. So they kind of extend upwards towards the sky. They're kind of like creating a giant arrow of wanting to have the viewer look upwards. For instance, here in this pole that is holding up this shade structure, they're kind of creating this line here that makes you look up to the shade structure. Same with the other poles that hold up the shade structure. A horizontal line, on the other hand, moves left to right or right to left, and it gives you the suggestion of feeling or rest or repose because it's parallel to the earth, are at rest. It's kind of like the idea that if when you're sleeping, so when you're drawing a person sleeping, you're going to put them in a horizontal pose. You wouldn't put them in a vertical pose because that just wouldn't make any sense. These lines are used to kind of, like I said before, to kind of create the idea of someone being at peace or at rest. Diagonal lines are neither vertical nor horizontal, and they convey a feeling of movement. Objects in a diagonal position feel unstable because they're either about to fall or are already in motion. For instance, this diagonal line right here creates this idea of motion, and that it looks like it's going off of the picture plane, and that it is at a slant, and that it could be a falling building, or maybe they're erecting it and it's moving forward towards this building. We're not quite sure because of the way that the picture is cropped. Curved lines convey energy. So at this point, when you think of a curved line, it's kind of like this part right here is like a rocket ship. It looks like it's about to go up into the air. Or if we think about it in another sense, it could be a starting point, maybe something accelerating and then de-accelerating, falling down to the ground. Zigzag lines are diagonal lines connected at each point. These lines can portray action and excitement. So for instance, you have a line that kind of connects here and then connects to a diagonal and then connects over here. This actually leads the viewer's eyes throughout the painting or picture at this point so that you can see the different areas of each of the piece. It's intentionally placed there. So we start at this point, we'll come around here, we come upward, we notice this point, we come here, and we come down. And then from there, it's almost we start all over again. A great composition will always have kind of a circular pattern to it so that you're always looking within the picture plane. An outline is a line that just defines the outer edges of the object. It doesn't put any of the details in it. You're only showing me what's on the outside of the object. We're not going in on showing windows. We're not drawing in the little details of the building, all the little tiny bricks. All we're doing is showing the pretty much outer limits of the object. Line quality, we also call this line weight, and it refers to the thickness and thinness of the line. And by varying out the line quality or weight, you add variety to your work, and flat objects appear to have form. So for instance here, this pole is much thicker because it's closer in the picture plane, but as we go back in the picture plane, this pole is much thinner. So it kind of gives this idea of depth, that this object, because it's closer to you, would be much bigger, and as the objects go farther away from you, they're much thinner or much smaller. And line qualities come in strong, medium, or fine. Shading lines can be used to create depth and shading. These types of lines are known as hatching and cross-hatching lines. So for instance, the shade structure up here, to show that it actually is a shade structure, there are lines that they use across the top here that kind of go vertical and then diagonal, so it kind of creates this thing we call a cross-hatch. This way that you know it's that it has some depth to it, that it has some shade to it, without actually just filling it all in on one color. Organic lines are always found in nature. These are lines that we use when we're creating people, when we're creating trees. We don't really want to create hard verticals or hard horizontals when we're creating things in nature, because in nature everything kind of has this weird free flowy line to it. Lines can also be implied. So, for instance, by creating objects that are at different heights in this picture and lining them up in a certain position, they are creating a line, but not actually by drawing one, but by creating a positioning of objects to create this diagonal line. And it makes the viewer's eye go towards this blue vase. There also can be lines implied by directional gazes. In this Renoir painting, you can see everybody is looking at a specific person. And these lines, although not are drawn for you to see who is looking at who, are not there in the original painting. These lines are what we call, once again, implied lines. These are lines of sight. And once again, they create this idea that we're going to person to person, looking at them and going, what's going on, and creating this circular plane in the picture path, or circular plane in the picture, so that we keep looking within the picture to see what's going on. We also use lines to create emphasis. And the line here, straight down the middle, it creates a stark contrast to the white and creates an emphasis on the center of this bull's skull. It also creates a framework with these red lines and this light blue in the middle. So line can be used to create emphasis. Same here in this picture, this gray line in comparison to the black all around her creates this emphasis on the middle. She also is wearing a white dress and white clothing compared to the background, which also kind of creates this vertical line straight in the middle of the painting. Lines can be expressive, so they can actually be used to talk about emotion. So, for example, maybe if you're fearful of something, maybe you feel very tiny, you would create this tiny little dot of a line. Happiness, a lot of times people associate happiness with rainbows, so they would create these kind of arc lines. Anger, very zigzag, very chaotic lines. Calm, kind of like ocean wave lines. Hungry, the rumbly sound of stomachs, you would have like these little zigzag lines. Creepy, maybe something like blood dripping or ooze dripping, and you would have like these organic lines. Caring, something very close and curled up, but maybe thick like a blanket. Insanity, lines that are just going every which way, zigzag, some curve, every different type of line combined. Concentration, maybe everything is just very focused, very straight, very horizontal, very vertical. Exhausted, maybe it starts off very, very thick, and then as you lose momentum, it becomes very thin. Sadistic, so maybe things that'll start off very normal and then become very crooked and strange as they start to progress. And of course whimsical, where it's just kind of like curls and swirls of just interesting. So to recap, there are 5 types of lines. You have your vertical line, you have your horizontal line, your zigzag line, your diagonal line, and your curved line. And each one of them represents a different thing when you create a drawing. You'll also remember that they have come in different thicknesses, which we call weights, and that they can also be used to create different meanings and emotions in each one of your pictures.